Hello there, guys. This video is all about gouache. Specifically, I am going to be testing out and doing a little demo with these 60 gouache colors from Arteza. I thought this would be a good way to get to know these gouache paints. The thing about a lot of Arteza supplies is that you can get all the colors. There are so many colors, almost too many colors, to where you don't even know what to do with yourself. So the first thing that I did was I made a color guide, and I did not do this with the watercolors, and I definitely regretted it. So I just took the sketchbook and made little swatches of every paint, and what I'm going to do for organization purposes is actually leave them in the little boxes they come with and keep them in this order if I can. There are two generally different types of paints that come in this set. One is regular good old matte gouache paint, and then the other are metallics. So this has a number of metallics, and we will be using both for this little test demo. Another feature on each tube of paint is that it lists the light fastness, so how resistant color is to fading, and also the transparency. Now, most of the tubes are full transparency. There are 7 out of 60 that are half transparency, and then there are 2 that are the least transparency. So we will be using all of them for this demo and seeing what's what. And here we have all of the colors. I put every single one of these colors in this massive palette that I have, and I intend to use as many as possible. The first thing I am testing is coverage. I am doing one solid layer of black, almost like a chalkboard effect, for the underlayer of this painting. And on top of my chalkboard, I did this Mexican embroidery inspired floral design. And I thought that this would be a really lovely piece to just kind of color in, use as many colors as possible, and let gouache do what it does best, which is layer and be opaque and colorful. So right off the bat, I can say that the coverage on the first layer of black is good. It's nice and opaque, and I can't really see through it at all. I'm also interested in seeing whether there's going to be any bleed on this black. So gouache is known for, opposite of watercolor, laying the darkest layer first, so this makes sense. But sometimes I do find that gouaches bleed through. So thus far, the Arteza is holding up pretty well. There's really no black bleeding through here. And this is a good point to look at the difference in transparency. So those boxes that I was talking about on the tubes of paint. Now you can see that the rose has more transparency than the greens and the blush pink. What I have found is that if there's a full box, you generally do not need 2 layers. It will be pretty opaque with just 1 layer. But if there's a half box, like the rose and this sap green, for example, you might actually need 2 layers for optimal coverage. And you can really see the difference that 2 layers make when you look at the center of that flower and how much more vibrant and opaque it is than the petal right next to it. Another thing that I wanted to test was the cover-up ability for these gouache paints. So as much as the neon pink was neon on this flower, I decided to cover it with purple, and I'm actually really happy with the coverage results on this purple. It's just really just 1 layer. You can see a little bit of the pink peeking through, but I think that's kind of charming. And for a set of gouache, testing out the white is super important. Often I use white gouache with watercolor and just a lot of things because it has that coverage. And so again, this titanium white holds up really nicely. And I think it makes this first flower really pop. I'm really happy with the effect of everything. And we are on to the second flower. Since there are a number of flowers in this piece, I'm going to speed things up quite a lot. The rest of this video is about 2,000 times sped up, just to give you guys a perspective on how long this actually takes. Although gouache is quite mindless, I don't find it to be a fast medium for me. I find it to be actually quite slow, and watercolor to be a lot faster, just because when you're painting opaque, you kind of, I think you have to be a bit more precise with it, and you can lean on the water less to do the work for you. I really wanted this middle flower to be really warm, really fiery, almost kind of like cayenne pepper. I also wanted to test out the pickup, so the erasability of this gouache. The benefit of gouache, again, over watercolor is that when you put a stroke down, you're not necessarily stuck with that stroke until the end of time. Often you can pick it up, and it looks like this gouache actually does that really nicely. Even over the black, it picked up almost all of that ochre. And now, the moment that you have all been waiting for, the Metallica showcase. In the spirit of this spicy flower, I wanted to accent it all with gold. And so we are using the golden metallic gouache. You can get this gouache in a separate set, and I've actually used the separate set before, but the benefit of this 60 set is it comes with all the things. So it comes with all the metallics and all the regular gouaches. And the metallic gouache is delightful. I mean, it is a little bit more transparent, actually, I would say, than the regular gouache. So I don't know if that full transparency box is necessarily warranted, but it's still pretty good. There were only a few parts that I decided to go over. I didn't have to go over the whole thing. And you can see in the middle of the flower, you get really good coverage. I think actually the hardest thing with this piece was that I was probably using a brush that was a little bit too big for it, actually. But being the stubborn and somewhat lazy person that I am, it is very hard to get me out of my seat when I started painting, even to get another brush. A cool little thing that I want to point out about this chalkboard effect-y type piece is that when you paint a darker color over the black, you get this drying effect that really does look like a chalkboard. So when you're putting the color down, it looks like it's not going to show up at all almost. And then as it starts to dry, it becomes much more vibrant. And you can see that illustrated in these green leaves really nicely. with the speeding up, it's really cool. You get to just see them pop out. I can talk about the color balance in the assortment of colors that you get a little bit. Now, what I have found with big, colorful sets of paint is that often there are more warmer colors than cooler colors, and there's a greater variety of warm versus cool. And actually, I find the same is going on here with this Arteza color set. I think it's definitely not missing anything, but if there's anything that you'll find yourself mixing, it's actually the colors between the greens and the blues. So I decided not to mix any colors, except I did add some white to a couple of these. But I wanted to, kind of straight out use them from the tube since I had so many colors. And the one thing I found myself wishing that I had was more of a true turquoise. So I think the blue-greeny colors are not there, basically. And what I do love about these colors is the vibrancy, especially on the black. They just look so pretty. I mean, look at that ultramarine around the petals. It's so poppy, and for me, it is so different than the usual watercolor that I paint with that it was kind of a breath of fresh air to paint this kind of paint by number piece and just test out a bunch of colors with you guys. So overall, I think that this gouache set is a very good deal for its price. It is about half the cost of like a Holbein gouache set, for example. And Holbein gouache is my preference, to be fair. If I am going to do a fine art piece or a botanical or something like that, I will use my Holbein gouache colors. This is definitely not a replacement set for those by any means. Why? Because I think that these have more pigment in them, so they seem a bit more chalky. Now, that does not affect the vibrancy of the color. You can see that they're very vibrant, but if you see how a pricier set of gouache would paint, I think the best way that I can describe it is that it looks a bit less chalky than these, and a bit more kind of silky, smooth, and the blending is a little bit better. So I don't recommend this as a replacement gouache set. I recommend this as if you are getting into gouache or you just want like a bunch of 60 colors of gouache to play with, this is your set. It's like $40 and I think it's well worth it. It is linked below, and there is a coupon for you guys as usual. And if you have any gouache pro tips, do tell. I am still new to the gouache, and I definitely don't claim to be a master at gouache by any means. I'm still definitely learning the ropes as I go. So, until we meet again, TTFN.